Being 7:01 p.m., I'm going to call this September 30th, 2025 special meeting of the Wakefield Conservation Commission to order. I guess our first order of business should be a roll call. Eleanor?
Here.
Jennifer?
Yeah.
And I'm present as well, so all three members present. The agenda tonight is focused on the proposed bylaw revisions to the proposed bylaw. I don't have it up in front of the agenda up in front of me, so Jennifer?
Right, so I think we wanted to do a presentation, just updating our discussion from last time, a public comment period, and then item 2 is time for the commission to discuss the bylaw changes, feedback.
Okay. So
Okay.
you ready for that presentation? I saw you'd put together a proposed presentation.
If you're ready, I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Go right ahead.
Okay. Welcome to the second public information session on the proposed wetland bylaw. The agenda for today is to provide an update on the status of the proposed bylaw following our session last week. Generally to continue to inform the public about the need for a bylaw, receive feedback about the bylaw, and understand what questions Wakefield residents have about the bylaw. We'll have a public comment time after the presentation for questions and feedback, and if you have any additional questions or comments after tonight's public comment section, you can email those to the Conservation Commission at our email address. Okay, so we had our first public information session on the bylaw last week on Tuesday. We had attendance of about 15 people, and the commission heard feedback from Wakefield residents, the town engineer, a longtime land use attorney, current and former members of local boards, and the commission also received emails from the public about the bylaw. You can watch the first public information session through a link on the Conservation Department's webpage on the town website. You can also see the slides from that presentation on the website. So in last week's public information session, we received a lot of feedback and comments. The number one comment we received was a request for the commission to hold off submitting the bylaw to the warrant for town meeting until spring to allow more time for the public to understand the bylaw and for the commission to hear comments and incorporate comments into the bylaw. So in last week's meeting, the commission agreed that we won't be submitting the bylaw to the fall town meeting. So instead, we're focusing now on a spring submission. In last week's meeting, we heard comments supporting better protection for wetlands in Wakefield. There were questions, of course, about how the bylaw would affect people personally in terms of their property and their businesses, and it was suggested to present some scenarios in an information session to help people understand what the bylaw will look like and how it will apply. We had comments about exemptions in the bylaw. The bylaw includes exemptions, but there was feedback about the wording of certain exemptions, requests to add exemptions to the bylaw. The things that I have bolded here on this list are the things that I'll be talking about tonight. I won't have any updates on exemptions because the commission is planning to talk about those further, so I won't have any new information on exemptions in the presentation, but we will in a future presentation. We heard comments or concerns about there being bylaw fatigue, and especially with the zoning recodification going on, and a comment expressing a desire for less regulation. We had questions about what the regulations to the bylaw will be. comments about how the regulations should be put forward, questions about what effects the bylaw will have on new developments, questions about is there an interest in Wakefield in a wetlands protection bylaw, and a few other questions as well. And I'll be addressing the items that are bolded tonight. So a quick recap about the need for wetlands protection bylaw in Wakefield. The purpose of the bylaw is to provide additional protections to wetlands in Wakefield in areas where the Wetlands Protection Act currently provides very little protection of wetlands. And that's specifically that the WPA provides very little protection for isolated wetlands, for vernal pools, and very little protection for buffer zones, or the area outside of the wetlands. So our goal is to increase and extend the protections of the Wetlands Protection Act in those key areas. So the bylaw does this in 3 specific ways. The first is to identify additional resource areas for protection by extending, again, protections to isolated wetlands, to vernal pools. It also does this by extending regulations to via a 25-foot no disturb zone around protected wetlands. And the bylaw also identifies additional public interests in protecting wetlands in Wakefield, specifically improving water quality, sedimentation and erosion control, recreation, and protecting rare species habitat, in addition to the interests that are currently protected under the Wetlands Protection Act. I wanted to present a different way of understanding the resource areas that are protected under the bylaw versus under the Wetlands Protection Act. So under the state's Wetlands Protection Act, one of the largest areas of wetlands that are currently protected or jurisdictional to the Wetlands Protection Act are bordering vegetated wetlands. These are either freshwater wetlands, bank, marsh, swamp, or beach that border on creeks, rivers, streams, ponds, lakes, or estuaries. And these types of wetlands that border on other wetlands are called in the Wetlands Protection Act bordering vegetated wetlands, because they're wetlands that border on other wetlands. And under the Wetlands Protection Act, bordering vegetated wetlands have a 100-foot buffer zone, meaning that significant activities within 100 feet of bordering vegetated wetlands have to be reviewed by the Conservation Commission to ensure that the wetland is being protected. The Wetland Protection Act also includes jurisdictional areas of riverfront area. That's the area 200 feet out from the boundary of a river or stream, land underwater or under wetlands, land subject to flooding, which is primarily floodplain, and banks. Under the local bylaw, the bylaw doesn't make this distinction of bordering vegetated wetlands. Instead, the bylaw extends protections to any freshwater wetland, bank, marsh, swamp, creek, river, stream, brook, lake, pond, or wet meadow or bog, which are types of freshwater wetlands, which is why they're asterisked here. So the bylaw protects all of these types of wetlands, whether they border on other wetlands or not. So in practice, what this would look like is the bylaw would protect wetlands that are currently considered bordering vegetated wetlands under the Wetlands Protection Act, meaning wetlands that are also jurisdictional to the Wetlands Protection Act, and wetlands that are not bordering on other wetlands, in other words, isolated wetlands. The bylaw also specifically extends protections to vernal pools. These are seasonal pools that dry up in the summer months and provide breeding ground for amphibian species. They're very specialized wetlands. And one of the major goals of the bylaw is to protect vernal pools. And these 3 resource areas, and at least in our draft of the wetland bylaw, all 3 of these resource areas would have a 100-foot buffer zone around them, meaning work that's conducted within 100 feet of these wetlands would be reviewed by the commission. The bylaw does also include as jurisdictional areas the same areas that are jurisdictional to the Wetlands Protection Act: riverfront area, land underwater, land subject to flooding, and bank. The question was asked in the previous public information session whether there is an interest in Wakefield in increasing protections for wetlands. And, you know, I think we've heard feedback from a number of people, you know, who feel that it's important to do that because of the services and the functions that wetlands provide. But also, you know, when you look at the communities around us in eastern Massachusetts, and the fact that, you know, a large majority of communities have passed bylaws protecting their wetlands, I think that alone suggests there's probably interest in Wakefield in protecting our wetlands as well. I don't think Wakefield is a place that cares less about wetlands than our neighboring communities. And just a little bit more data on communities that have passed wetlands protection bylaws. Wakefield, it falls within the Northeast region, the Mass DEP Northeast region. 40 communities in this region have an open town meeting format like we do, and 90% of those communities in the Northeast have passed a wetlands protection bylaw. So residents of those communities are voting directly to increase protections of their local wetlands. It's the concern about having a desire for less regulation. You know, I understand some people will probably vote on the bylaw based on that concern. But I do want to emphasize that the commission is looking closely at what other communities are doing in terms of their bylaws, you know, to make sure that we're sort of not dramatically out of step or significantly out of step with what other communities around us are doing in terms of how they're protecting their bylaws. So, you know, statewide, most communities that have a local bylaw are protecting their isolated wetlands, identifying a buffer zone of 100 feet, identifying a no disturb zone. When they do identify a no disturb zone, it's usually 25 feet or even larger. Most communities are protecting, providing additional protections for vernal pools beyond what's beyond the protection of the Wetlands Protection Act, and giving vernal pools a buffer zone size of 100 feet. And most communities are having submission fees for their bylaws. We also compared, we also looked at the characteristics of bylaws for communities that are near Wakefield and communities that have similar wetland resources to Wakefield. And this just shows how, you know, our bylaw draft is consistent with what those communities are doing in terms of the resource areas they're protecting, having a no disturb zone of 25 feet, and what they're doing with their buffer zone size. Okay, so I'll go through a couple of scenarios for how the bylaw would apply. This won't be exhaustive. You know, I think we'll have more scenarios in upcoming meetings. But this is just to start to get an understanding of what it would look like, you know, to have this bylaw in effect. So we can, you know, imagine a project that's planned, a hypothetical project that's planned by the town that involves putting, you know, building a utility building along the south shore of Lake Bonaparte. And so building this building would involve laying a foundation, constructing the building, creating new impervious surface, installing a walkway, grading on the site, installing new trenching and new electrical service, and using heavy machinery. So the first thing to be aware of, so, you know, Lake Bonaparte is a jurisdictional area to the Wetlands Protection Act and would be as well under the local proposed bylaw. And as a jurisdictional area, it has a 100-foot buffer zone from the boundary of the lake. So if we were to think about, you know, a project proposal for a utility building where the building we're going to be constructed outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. And if all of the construction activities were conducted outside of the 100-foot buffer zone, you know, this work would not require review by the commission under either the Wetlands Protection Act or under the bylaw. It is possible that, if the boundary of the wetland were unclear and therefore the location of the buffer zone were unclear relative to the planned construction and building, it might be necessary to have a delineation performed on the wetland in order to determine that, whether the work requires review by the Conservation Commission. If we consider a different scenario where this work to construct a utility building is planned within the 100-foot buffer zone, so the building would be inside the buffer zone, the construction activities would be inside the buffer zone. This work would require review by the Conservation Commission under both the Wetlands Protection Act, because the lake is a bordering vegetated wetland, and under the bylaw because it's a freshwater wetland. Both the Wetlands Protection Act and the bylaw specify a 100-foot buffer zone for this wetland. The activities that are planned are activities that are regulated under the bylaw and the Wetlands Protection Act. And a project like this would likely not qualify for any exemption. It's not an emergency project. It's not maintaining existing utilities. So it wouldn't be exempt from review. So things that the Conservation Commission would consider in evaluating this project. First, it's going to consider the cumulative effects or alterations that this project and its construction would have on the wetland area. The Commission would apply any performance standards that are in the bylaw or regulations to the project, and the Commission would evaluate whether this project avoids alterations to the wetland, minimizes alterations, and where alterations take place, mitigate those alterations. So if we think of an example where the construction plan for this project, again, hypothetically involved stockpiling earth, let's say, in close proximity to the shore of Lake Quannapowitt, exposed, unsecured, and also included, for example, storing gasoline within the 100-foot buffer zone, the Commission would say, we would like to not see those things done in the buffer zone, and would ask the project to, to move the stockpile further from the wetland, not store the gasoline within the 100-foot buffer zone. And those are already standard types of discussions that already happen when projects go before the Commission under the Wetlands Protection Act. And I think most builders already know that those are the expectations for work that's done around wetlands. So under the bylaw, a 25-foot no disturb zone will apply. This is specific to the bylaw and not to the Wetlands Protection Act. There is a presumption that certain activities within 25 feet of the wetland will cause alterations to the wetland. That presumption can be overcome, but that would certainly influence, how the Conservation Commission reviews the projects and the expectations they would have for the work done on this project. So this project would be heard before, in a public hearing before the Conservation Commission, and the Commission would decide, on permitting the project again based on these factors that the Commission's going to consider about performance standards, impacts, and whether the work avoids, minimizes, or mitigates alterations to the wetlands. You can consider one more scenario along these lines, involving, the building being proposed to be built within 25 feet of the wetland. Here both the building is within the 25-foot no disturb zone. Construction activities would be occurring within the 25-foot zone. Because it falls within the buffer zone, this project would require a review, the same as above under the Wetlands Protection Act and under the bylaw. The 25-foot no disturb applies. Again, there's a presumption that certain activities in this area will alter the wetland. Again, in evaluating this project, the Commission's gonna examine the expected alterations to the wetland. We'll compare the work against performance standards. We'll assess whether whether the planned work avoids alterations, minimizes alterations, and mitigates alterations. This would be a very difficult project to have passed under the bylaw. The applicant would, may need to overcome the presumption that this would cause harm to or alterations to Lake Quannapowitt. Or the applicant might request a waiver for this work. If this project were denied by the commission, and the applicant wanted to appeal the project or appeal the decision, that appeal would go both to Superior Court and to DEP, but DEP would defer to Superior Court's decision in the matter. And this is in the case where the bylaw, where the particular project involves the bylaw being stricter than the Wetlands Protection Act in a way that applies to the specific project. Okay. Considering another scenario involving work near a vernal pool. Oh, I'll go back and mention a couple of things here. So this is, a hypothetical situation involving work on town property, but this would look similar if this is private property. The standards wouldn't be any different, for evaluating, this project on town land versus on private land. This would probably be a pretty common situation under the bylaw where the wetland is jurisdictional under both the Wetlands Protection Act and the bylaw, but the bylaw would have a stricter standard for the work by having the 25-foot no disturb zone. Okay, on to a second scenario. This one involves another hypothetical situation involving work near a vernal pool. We can think about a project where a new water main is being installed near a vernal pool that is not, that's isolated and is not certified. So in other words, a vernal pool that's not protected under the Wetlands Protection Act. This project would involve, cutting trees, trenching, placing a new pipe, attaching it, backfilling the trench, and using heavy machinery. So the first thing is that this vernal pool, which in this picture is sort of the area with the interrupted tree canopy in the center of the circle. So this vernal pool would have a 100-foot buffer zone around it under the bylaw. So if this were to install a new water main, were planned entirely outside of the buffer zone, where the main itself is outside the buffer zone, all of the construction activities are outside of the buffer zone, then review would not be required by the Conservation Commission because this is an isolated, not certified vernal pool, would not be jurisdictional to the Wetlands Protection Act. And the bylaw, it would fall outside of the regulation of the bylaw because the work is entirely outside of the buffer zone of the vernal pool. Again, if it's unclear what the wetland boundary is and therefore where the 100-foot buffer zone is, it may be necessary for the wetlands to be delineated in order to determine whether review is required. But if the project and the work were entirely outside the buffer zone, it would not require review. We can imagine a different situation in which the water main were planned to cross into the 100-foot buffer zone, as well as the construction activities on the water main. This project would be jurisdictional under the Wetlands Protection Bylaw because the bylaw protects isolated vernal pools and uncertified vernal pools, includes a 100-foot buffer zone around the vernal pool. The activities that are planned would be activities that are regulated by the bylaw within the buffer zone. And this work would be unlikely to fall under any exemption. Again, a 25-foot no disturb zone would apply to this project. So 25 feet around the vernal pool would be more regulated. There's a presumption that certain activities within that 25 feet would cause alterations to the wetland. The Conservation Commission would consider for this project both the finished product and the construction itself. What are the cumulative alterations on the wetlands? What are the performance standards? And whether the project and the work avoid and minimize alterations and mitigate any alterations to the wetlands. So this is a project that would be heard in a public hearing before the Conservation Commission. So this is a project that, unlike the last one, involves a wetland area that is not jurisdictional to the Wetlands Protection Act. It's also involves regulation that is stricter than the Wetlands Protection Act because of the 25-foot no disturb zone. However, the types of, to a large extent, the types of, accommodation or construction accommodations to this type of work are similar to what would be done around wetlands that are currently regulated under the Wetlands Protection Act. And we'll have more scenarios to present in a future session. In the previous information session, we talked about an overview of the bylaw, more information about what are buffer zones, and why are buffer zones and vernal pools important for wildlife habitat, with specific reference to wildlife here in Wakefield. If they're interested in learning more about that, you can watch that information session. Again, the link is on the Conservation Department's homepage on the town website. Some questions we received in the last information session about how are vernal pools certified. The process is pretty rigorous. It requires evidence to be submitted about the biology of the vernal pool, what kinds of species are present, the hydrology of the vernal pool, how much water it holds at different times of year. So it requires a lot of information gathering. It's not something that can be done easily. And then the NHESP evaluates the evidence to determine whether there's sufficient evidence to show that the criteria for a vernal pool are met. So I think the concern was that, every sort of small pond in Wakefield might get certified as a vernal pool, but I don't think that's the case because I don't think there are a limited number of wetlands in Wakefield that have these characteristics. According to the NHESP database, there are currently 6 certified vernal pools in Wakefield, and there are around 25 potential vernal pools. There may be more potential vernal pools than that, but that's the number that the NHESP has identified as potential vernal pools in town. And I mentioned this when talking about scenarios, but in terms of appeals of decisions by the Conservation Commission, when the project involves an aspect of the bylaw that is stricter than the Wetlands Protection Act, the appeal will go to Superior Court and to DEP. The DEP would defer to Superior Court's decision, where the project or a potential denial involves an aspect of the bylaw that's not stricter than the Wetlands Protection Act. The appeal would go to DEP, which is where appeals currently go under the Wetlands Protection Act. And per the bylaw, the bylaw would not require a second order of conditions for work, but the order of conditions would just be appended onto the order of conditions under the Wetlands Protection Act if there is one. Okay, so those are the updates that I have tonight after last week's information session. There are areas that we didn't cover today, which we will cover in future information sessions following further discussion by the Conservation Commission, including on exemptions, on the regulations, and on effects of new development. So I think at this point we'll open up for public comments. Again, if you have any additional comments after tonight, you can email them to the Conservation Commission.
Hello, this is Doug Heath. I'm at 28 Stedman Street. I have a question about how accurate are wetland maps in Wakefield? Since we're dealing with fixed buffer distance criteria, 25 feet or 100 feet, it's important to understand just where those boundaries are so we know that a project falls within or outside of those criteria. How confident are we with the mapping that's currently have for Wakefield?
So there are maps of wetlands in Wakefield, but the Conservation Department recommends that when people are planning work on their property and have essentially kind of wet areas on their property that might be wetlands, whether that's ponds, streams, including areas that might be wet seasonally, that they speak with the Conservation Department, and the conservation agent will, look at maps as a starting point, but we'll probably also want to see the wetlands in the field. Wetland maps aren't comprehensive, so the fact that a wetland doesn't appear on a map doesn't mean that there's not a wetland there. And I don't think a map would be a basis for a delineation of a wetland. That's something that has to be done in the field to determine exactly the boundary of the wetland and then therefore where the 100-foot buffer is for the wetland.
The second question, if I may. We all know that these fixed criteria are just really elements of convenience, because they're fairly easy lines to draw on a map and tells you whether or not some activities for protection should occur. To really protect these resources, we should do a much more thorough hydrogeologic evaluation. For example, look at groundwater flow directions, look at the water quality, the existing water quality that's in the area, understand the basic geology, and also the possible fate and transport of any pollutants that may emanate from the project. For example, if you already have a lot of contamination flowing toward a vernal pool or wetland, you don't want to load additional, pollutants, from a proposed project. And unless you have water quality information, you won't have that understanding as to whether the project should be permitted or not. So is there any consideration to address those kind of issues, to do a more thorough evaluation to enhance the protection efforts that we're all seeking?
So I think Paul and Eleanor may also, want to weigh in on this, but the plans that the commission receives usually include topographical maps with information about elevations that, may help to answer some of those questions engineering usually provides the analysis for effects on stormwater for the commission, but where a project is more complex than what, the commission can evaluate itself. There's the possibility of having a consultant to provide an additional opinion to the commission.
So does the commission have the authority to require a petitioner to provide that information as part of your review, if necessary?
To provide the information, or
to hire a engineering firm or hydrogeologist to do the necessary evaluation, prior to the project going forward.
We have language in the proposed bylaw to grant us that authority to require.
Okay.
Where we deem it necessary.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah, but it's a fair question, because I think some wetlands are not showing up on maps. Like there's one in my neighborhood on the west side where there was a project done just off Prospect Street. I don't believe, Paul, you're frowning at me, I don't believe you can find that wetland on Mass Mapper or on the assessor's map. So, it's not complete, and it's something definitely we need to look at. I don't know if Bill's on the call, if he has any thoughts on that.
Well, Bill has his hand up.
Yeah. So the way the wetlands are shown currently on our GIS is based on the DEP wetland layer. So as the DEP gets applications that come to them, they map them. So they basically use your applications that you get and continually update. So that's where our stuff comes from. So we don't update it ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bill, do you have something else you wanted to say?
No, I was actually going to say that originally.
So basically, as I understand it, then what you're saying is you rely on Mass Mapper
I do. Yeah.
Wait,
So
that-
we pull those layers down. Yeah, we pull that layer down along with the flooding, some other state layers that are state maintained, and we add that to our GIS and for our mapping. That's where it comes from.
Other questions or comments on this evening discussion? Tina Beltwich.
Hi, Tiana Veldwish, 28 West Water. I just want to say I support this proposal. I support the Conservation Commission having more teeth to protect important geological features like wetlands. I appreciate the expanded definition of what wetlands are in this case. I thought the slide comparing what's protected through the original legislation and what would be protected here. That was very helpful to see what that difference is. I didn't understand that prior to tonight's presentation, so I appreciate that context. And I think this is important. I think it's pretty shameful that we as a community don't have more protections. It's that you indicate many towns in our area and with similar geological features have. So I'm all for this, and I appreciate very much all the work that y'all have been putting into making this possible. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments tonight? Brian McGrail, I think had his hand up next.
Hi, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I just wanted to say, I think that was an excellent presentation. It was very well done, and it did a great job of kind of tracking where you're going with this and incorporating all the comments. So I thought it was very well done. I just had a point of interest. Is there any thought on why the western part of the state? It's kind of split on the state on who has them, where it's Eastern Mass has a lot of local bylaws and Western Mass has any few. I'm just curious. It's kind of maybe because there's more development in this area possibly, but that's just kind of odd to me.
I think that's probably the case, that it's the more developed parts of the state that have the wetland bylaws. Jennifer, could you put that slide back up?
Sure.
I don't think it has any relevance on us doing it or not. It's just an interesting point. That's all.
No, I was curious as to whether or not the developed parts in Western Mass are also generally have wetland bylaws.
Some do. Well, I know you mean specific towns, Paul.
Yeah, I was thinking about towns like Northampton, Holyoke, and Pittsfield. Sort of looks like there is a cluster around
Worcester.
Connecticut Valley. There's a cluster around Worcester.
Yeah.
You along the state line in on the border with New York. So probably, I would guess it tracks development.
It has no relevance, but it was just interesting. That's all.
Thanks, Jennifer. Julie.
Hi,
Julie.
thanks again for tonight. It's funny that Brian just asked that question because I made a couple phone calls today, and it is really a lot about development, but they also, some of those communities have ordinances, and if they have ordinances, it might not appear on that map. They have wetlands ordinances. So that was it's an interesting thing. I had the same type of question. I'm also following, I had printed out the 51-page long Mass Ready Act, the environmental bond bill that's coming our way, which will have a tremendous impact on the community. I didn't know how much information from that potential Mass Ready Act has been included in the plan here for Wakefield's bylaws. Thank you.
So we had a draft of the bylaw before, at least before I learned of the Mass Ready Act. So I don't think that act itself influenced, how the bylaw was developed. I would have to go back and look at the Mass Ready Act. My impression was that it didn't set aside bylaws, but I'd have to look again. I think that's a question maybe, at least, I personally would have to look again to answer.
It's really long. when I did a quick Google search about some of the criticisms of the bill, it talked about the impact of the enormous changes that seem to be designed to help developers and how they may negatively impact the work of local conservation commissions. That was a very critiquing Google search. But again, it's important to make sure we know about the contents of this bill. And it would be really good to inform our town council about this potential change coming to all communities. It's very similar to the MBTA 3A Communities Act, which really affected home rule. And this seems to be developed around the idea of lessening the home rule in regard to our conservation wetlands acts. Thanks.
I mean, I can address this a little bit, which is it was part of the budget amendment process, which makes me nervous. The idea that through a sort of brokered budget process, you might repeal decades of regulatory, well thought out regulatory legislation, as flawed as some parts of the Wetlands Protection Act may be in practice, it's something. And so I was concerned about some of the, softening of process, maybe, not being required to inform as many abutters, maybe being more flexible about building closer to certain resource areas. But it's kind of a moving target, and we just have to track and see where it goes and continue, I guess, to try and make people aware and provide feedback to their representatives.
In that same article I was reading, and again, it wasn't a balanced article, but it did say that the authors seemed to think that this was really a focus of developers and putting things on the fast track. And local permitting bodies like local conservation commissions wouldn't have the amount of time that they're used to having to deal with certain issues, because things would be put on a quicker track.
Thank you. That's true. It makes me nervous, again, to be one of the few municipalities in the area that doesn't have a local bylaw, to have something to give us a little more legs to stand on. Again, we're not sure what direction that's going to go, but it's a concern, and I'm hoping we can work on a, compromise or, a solution that benefits the most people in town.
Sort of
Protects.
as an aside to what you're doing, Article 97 land may become more important than ever. I know a number of years ago, we put the energy park in. I wish it had gone to the other potential site on Albion Street. I think for the Conservation Commission to really focus dually on getting as much Article 97 land under its belt as it possibly can, it would be hugely helpful. We've got Town Forest to think about. We've got the Arundel Ave area to think about. I think we've got some areas by the lake that we should be thinking about as well. So just a thought. Thanks again for having this. This is really informative. Thank you.
Anything further tonight? Okay, I think we will close the public hearing portion of the meeting, since we've heard all comments, and move to discussion of these comments as well as comments we received previously, and take steps to move forward on the document.
So Paul, this is Doug Heath again. Just a question, what are the next steps in this process?
We have to continue to move to address public comments in our drafting of the document. We have a proposed draft of a document, which obviously we published and has been under discussion. We need to make changes to that document in response to the comments we've received from the public, from other town departments, and from various members of the commission. And then we will be moving that along over the next several meetings of the commission, both this special meeting and probably several of our meetings going forward until we get to the point of having a draft that we're happy with. And ultimately, we'll be taking that to town meeting, hoping we can wrap that up late this year, early next year, and then take it to town meeting in the spring.
Okay, well, thank you. And I want to
Yeah.
thank Jennifer again for an excellent presentation.
Yeah, that was quite a good presentation, Jennifer.
Paul, the only thing I would add is we have to work on the regulations once we've solidified the
Once we've
bylaw. Yeah. Or see
Right.
if we can, get it going concurrently where we have clear, consensus.
Agreed.
So thank you so much, Doug, for your feedback and for everybody who showed up and offered feedback. It definitely helps us think through these issues as opposed to us just talking amongst ourselves.
Do we?
So you want to close? We have Bill on the call. Do we want to just quickly talk about maybe the 3 things we want to accomplish next? If we have Bill on the call, can we, maybe talk about, can we talk through exemptions, for example, and, make sure we agree on the goals and then we can fine tune language? I don't know if that would be helpful.
What about starting with like the resource areas and how you want to delineate them first? Because I mean, I think that's kind of the bare bones basic starting spot, right? So I mean, you're looking for like at least my understanding is we're looking for 3 things, right? So you're looking for the no touch zone to be codified, which makes sense, right? You're looking for, the isolated wetland discussion or isolated land subject to flooding, whatever we were calling that, has kind of changed a little bit in the thought process behind that. So, how you want to handle that. Because typically if it's an isolated land subject to flooding, that doesn't have a buffer. But if you're looking to create that, how you delineate the limits of that isolated land. And then obviously for the vernal pools, I think that's, are you folks looking to just follow any potential vernal pools? Because I think you're potentially losing authority over, other ones that might not have been identified yet. So, just following the National Heritage Program might not be what you folks are looking for. I think, you'd probably want to revise that definition a little bit in case you're seeing something on a lot. Obviously, you would want that to be protected, correct?
Yes.
So I think those would be the spots I think we want to start thinking about first, and then kind of roll everything out around it.
Okay. So can we just start with the basic wetland and the 25-foot no disturb? I think there would be no changes in the way that boundary was delineated, right? We're not changing bank. Jennifer, can you think of anything else? It would be vegetation, soil, bank.
Right.
No, not about the delineation, but when I was reading the setback section, I actually think it's a little ambiguous currently because it says, the commission shall presume that work within 25 feet of any resource area as defined in 310 CMR 1004 or a vernal pool will, and I'm not sure that that's actually accurate because I think that would include, I just think it's non-specific. And I think it doesn't really address whether the 25-foot setback would apply to riverfront or, in riverfront area. I think we're pretty sure that we, at least from previous discussions, that we don't necessarily plan to put that on land subject to flooding.
Yep.
But riverfront, and that reference to NCMR.
Well, your riverfront already, so you have your 200 foot anyway,
Mhm.
right? So there needs to be an alternatives analysis that's done and all of that anyway, right? So in my mind, you already have that protection through the WPA, right? So I think it's really wetlands and bank as your where you would have your 25-foot no touch, right? Because that's where you would be looking for, unless I'm missing something. But maybe your vernal pool, right? I would imagine you'd want to do it around that. So those would be the three things, right?
It would seem that the way it's currently, I believe the bylaw is currently drafted. We have 25 feet around wetlands.
Yep.
But it would appear we only have 100-foot buffer and not a 25-foot no touch around vernal pools. Am I reading things incorrectly?
That's the way I read it.
Okay, so you and I are.
Yeah. We're reading it the same way. And then I think also you'd want to have it around land underwater, right? I mean, that's so when, like the example that Jennifer was giving us about the lake and using Lake Q as bordering as BVW, it's not BVW, that's considered land underwater. So you'd be looking to have a 25-foot no touch from a bank, essentially, as well. So you'd want to be narrowing that down for those two resource areas only. And then the vernal pool, once you figure out how you want to delineate that vernal pool. And then if you're not doing it for isolated land subject to flooding and you're just going to use that for stormwater, we can, probably discuss that, how we would want to handle that. That might not be something that you would necessarily regulate to that level. Because I think, the example you folks were using was the one from that Elaine did in Winchester, but realistically, she doesn't have a buffer on that. That's only just to make sure that the stormwater calculations incorporate that depression as a small mini pond because their houses are so close together. So that's not necessarily something that you're looking to have as a no touch buffer, I don't think. But I think you got to clarify all those amongst yourselves and how you're looking to move it forward.
Could you
Oh,
back
oh,
up
go on.
and
Mhm.
describe the details of the Winchester item, Bill?
So they use the isolated land subject to flooding or isolated wetland, but they're only in the Wetland Protection Act. It doesn't have a buffer associated with it, so they use it essentially as like storage area. So think of it like a detention basin almost, like a natural detention basin that's there. So if I'm reviewing somebody that has a stormwater design and we see a depression area on a lot, we would always have them model that within their stormwater report. And so that's basically what Winchester did. Because I mean, keep in mind their bylaw was created back in the 80s, like prior to everything being, everything being done. So they were using it for stormwater control. They were using it for a bunch of stuff at the time when they created it.
Yeah.
So I think you folks have to decide, and we touched upon this at the last meeting, what you would want to do first is your limit, right? And to define what that limit's going to include, and then how you want to regulate it. Is it going to have a no touch? My guess is that it probably wouldn't, but you may want to include that. I don't know. I think you folks have to decide what the thought process is on that. And then we can write it around it.
Yeah, it seems like, in my mind at least, that wetlands should have the 25-foot no touch buffer. In addition, I'm inclined to think that certified vernal pools need the same kind of protection.
Without a doubt, I agree with that.
Given the sensitivity of that kind of habitat. On the other hand, what we've classified, I guess, as IVWs, isolated vegetative wetlands, that may not have that same kind of habitat significance as a vernal pool does, that may be an area where we don't necessarily impose a 25-foot no-touch boundary. We
Okay.
maintain the 100-foot buffer around any and all of this stuff, but we don't necessarily impose anything other than the boundary of the IBW is an area of that's protected.
Can we back up to the vernal pool quickly? Because most bylaws, I think, protect the vernal pool habitat, which is 100 feet. Right? If you destroy the connection to the upland habitat, then your frogs can't get back to the vernal pool.
So how do you define the habitat element?
So the Wetlands Protection Act defines it. So I had taken a stab talking to Elaine with just breaking that out separately, and rather than talking about a vernal pool and a 25-foot buffer, just saying that focusing on protecting the vernal pool habitat. And then
Protecting it protecting
like it would essentially have like 100-foot buffer, right? And then we have to decide if that's going to be no disturb or limited disturb. But it doesn't make sense to just give a 25-foot buffer to a vernal pool, because then you're essentially allowing the destruction of the critical habitat of the vernal pool.
Okay, I'll ask this question then. Are there criteria for identifying vernal pool habitat?
Yes. So this comes from the Wetlands Protection Act.
Okay.
And so this was, Bill, I wasn't sure you were going to attend this meeting. This was language I researched and just inserted as a starting point for us to think about.
Okay.
But it's the vernal pool habitat is any confined basin or depression, as well as the area within 100 feet of the edge of the depression, which holds water for a minimum of 2 contiguous months during the spring and or summer, is free of adult predatory fish populations, and provides essential breeding and rearing habitat functions for amphibian, reptile, and other vernal pool community species, regardless of whether the site has been certified by Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife.
Okay. Right now we have that as I mean, the draft I was looking at had it as vernal pool, not vernal pool habitat.
Correct. This was Elaine's suggestion to kind of get away from because the conflict in our draft bylaw was what Bill kind of brought out. Like, it's not clear whether that you're having the 25-foot applies or doesn't apply. Like, it was confusing and not. So this was her suggestion if we, wanted to protect as much of the, vernal pool habitat as possible.
So can we get a copy of that draft,
Yes,
maybe, so we can, that would be helpful, right?
Eleanor, you sent out
Like I literally just
markup.
sent it like marked up, Bill, like an hour before this.
Ah, okay. I didn't check it.
So, but I can share my screen. Do you want me to share my screen? That might make it.
Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
Yeah. And really my thought was, let me send it, like discuss high level, send it out to you all, and then kind of, you kind of need to react to it. It's hard to, I think with this stuff, make decisions on the fly without sort of reading it and processing it.
You're gonna need
Agreed.
to make that bigger.
Bigger? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put on my glasses. I can't.
Paul, I may have to take my glasses off to see it. That's how bad I
Okay.
am. So.
Yeah.
So,
One more, please.
okay, one more.
That's
Does that help?
Does for me.
Okay. So that you're defining it. Yeah. So it's 100 feet within the edge of the depression. right? So you're using the bank. And the thought process there is you don't know when people are out delineating, and vernal pools don't have water in them. If you're by nature, if you're using the water as the boundary, that's not effective. Your vernal pool could be like a pinprick or something like that.
No, yeah. So it's usually what they do is they're looking at like the stain, like the annual staining line or
Staining,
something.
yeah.
You usually you can see like the matted down leaf. You'll usually see stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's what ends up happening.
Okay, so we're eliminating, in this proposal, Eleanor, we'd be eliminating the exception for existing lawns, gardens, landscaped areas, or driveways.
I think we could put that in the exceptions list, because in my mind, that's where you, based on the last feedback, I think we want a couple of different categories of exemptions, one for like besides Bill's stuff for drainage, existing homes, and essentially your existing developed area, right?
Right.
So that would be an exemption. I don't think we're going to find a vernal pool in somebody's,
Backyard?
in the lawn that the landscapers are mowing.
Yeah, they're
No.
probably tough. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're gonna find it if somebody has like like not in a lawn, but like an uncleared section of their lot. That's where you'd find it.
Right. It's
I mean,
not
I've
gonna
had
be,
I've done
Right.
subdivisions
Well,
where you're
somebody.
walking through and run into one. So I mean that's happened to me a couple of times.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So long as
So,
we pick that up somewhere else, that's fine.
Mhm.
and then when you go down to it, let's see, down here. So I think just when we read it, making sure it flows in a way that makes sense. So vernal pool habitat, vernal pools are protected as a resource under this bylaw. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah, I'm reading it now. So there's
Can keep reading. There's a presumptive definition of the existence and extent of vernal pools that virtually all basins possess above.
yeah.
And then it describes it may have intermittent flow or outflow.
Yeah.
It can be isolated. The presumption of the vernal pool habitat may be overcome by the presence of credible evidence, which in the judgment of the commission demonstrates that the water body does not provide or cannot provide vernal pool habitat functions. And
Yeah. So that all makes sense. Like I like that. See, I would structure it so that any new definition that you're getting jurisdiction over, that you have something kind of like that for each section of your your resource area. Almost like in the Wetland Protection Act, they have like the little preambles at the beginning of each type of resource area.
Oh,
Because like this would be like a good beginning section that like frames it for everyone as to what you think. And then as you get into it, then you highlight how to delineate it, right?
Okay.
So and then you figure out whatever the buffers are, and you basically structure them so all of them are like that each time. I think that's the cleanest way to do it.
Okay.
That would be my suggestion or recommendation. Ethan, does that make sense to you?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
you're
think
saying
it
to
does.
organize them like the Wetlands Protection Act has it with like the introduction and the purpose and all that, but for each
Got it.
word, yeah.
For each
For each
thing that we're
resource
trying to
area.
Resource.
area, yeah.
Okay.
Where are we?
How define? And sorry, what was the last thing you said? You put in the performance standards, did you say?
Well, you put in how to delineate it, right?
Yeah,
So
how
you have to,
delineate,
that's the big key here, because we have to be clear in the bylaw part on how
Right.
we're delineating the resource area that we're asking for protection on, right?
Right. And then what we're doing is this was, after talking it through with Elaine, how to make it simpler, we're pointing to the way one would go about certifying a vernal pool. So your referencing the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife guidelines for certification of vernal pools.
Right.
And so those have all the stringent criteria that Jennifer talked about. And then if it doesn't meet those criteria, that's how you would also overcome the presumption of vernal pool habitat.
Right.
And I think the only sort of open question there is who's qualified, what's that qualified independent reviewer?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have suggestions on that, I mean, I was thinking it could be even somebody who is a subject matter expert who has certified vernal pools. It doesn't necessarily need to be a paid consultant.
Yeah, I think you're fine leaving it as qualified independent reviewer. I mean, I
Okay.
don't see that as an issue. I think that's fine.
Okay.
And we can make.
We use that type of language all the time. It gives them open-ended to, you just have to make sure the person, whoever's signing off on it, is reasonable, but that'd be
Okay.
part of your application process.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yep, that makes sense to me.
So
So I'm just trying to understand this, Kay. So we're providing guidelines for determining upcoming areas of vernal pool habitat, and then you're proposing using this instead of a presumption of a vernal pool habitat?
No, I think that's your section at the beginning is you're explaining the presumption of the significance of the habitat, right? And then you're going through and explaining how it would be delineated, right? And how it would be determined to be a vernal pool. So that's what you're doing here with the in K and I, pretty close with that. And then you'd have like J that would explain how you're determining the limits of it. Right. So first you have to determine, so there's two for the vernal pool is a good example because you have to have two tests essentially, right? One that you have something in there that qualifies to make it habitat, right? So there's something in it essentially. And then how you're going to define that limit of what you're going to use for your buffer. Right. So you got to, in this, we have to make it clear that somebody can put flags down to determine where the flags go. And if you're not using like the high water line, right, and trying to keep it different, then we just got to figure out whatever that term would be for your high point of the vernal pool. Whether it's vegetation change, whether it's like I said, like staining line or something to that effect. I mean, that people use that a lot.
I like Edge of the Depression because for years, I'll just give you an example. I've hiked past one in Breakheart Reservation, and the water levels fluctuate so much. Like it can, the depression never changes, but where that staining can be, like, changes a lot. And some, like, one year there'll be a drought and it's a small vernal pool, and then another year it can be pretty full and right up to that edge.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
you
I see
wouldn't
where you're
want-
coming from. But depending on how the topography is, that the depression technically could be huge, right? Because you have to define that break or whatever you would decide where the top of it is. Like I'm just thinking of a scenario. Like I had a site where it was like a huge hill coming down, right? And then there was it kind of created like a bowl, but the whole thing wasn't, vernal pool. Obviously, there was a small section of it that was. So if you're saying the whole depression, I mean that could be
no,
an acre.
not like between.
Yeah, right. You know what I'm saying?
Not
That's
between
where
the mountains. Like,
yeah, you got it. So, but you got to have something to define it, right? So,
okay. I mean, we can include vegetation or trees, right?
yeah,
Because usually, okay.
yeah. Maybe we take a peek. Like once I get the draft, I can take a peek, and Ethan and I can probably go through and look to see what's in, what's in the WPA and in the division stuff, and see if we can cobble a few things together that would make sense as a limit.
So that was the one I think I tried to wrangle, which we can look at. Go back. And then, let's see. The 25-foot boundary, are we okay with that, Jennifer? Like we're still stuck. I think the biggest issue we're gonna have to probably work through is the isolated
Mhm.
wetlands.
IVW and how we're gonna
Yeah.
do that. Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
I think the 25-foot no disturb zone makes sense for wetlands and vernal pools. I think the question will be some of these other isolated areas of ponding and whether we impose, for example, that one, are you talking about that artificial detention basin that got built on Prospect Street when you mentioned the one in the neighborhood, Eleanor?
no, I'm talking about the wetland that was there, right? It used to be,
adjacent to it.
yeah, kind of behind. It got, this is Bill to Clyde, like the Clyde Court development.
Yep.
It used to be just one house, and then I think to the side and kind of the back was a wetland. And it got sort of re-engineered. It's an interesting
No,
property.
that's so
Well-
that had like a breakout area almost is what it was. It was like a pipe that was there, and then it,
Oh, was
it
that it?
broke out into, yeah, into like that little kind of defined stream kind of thing. So it's like an intermittent stream boundary.
Uh-huh.
And that's all they had for wetland. So there was a tiny little sliver of wetland, but really it was on the neighbor's property. And
Yeah.
it sort of broke out through what used to be like kind of where the house is. It kind of broke out somewhere behind that, the current house that's there.
Yeah,
So-
and it still
There
does.
was
I
no
mean, who put the pipe
Oh.
there, Bill?
Oh, that's why
The
it's
pipe-
not on a map.
Yeah, so it's not like it's this tiny little small thing. That's why there wasn't anything that I recall being filled in that was isolated. But I'd have to go back and look at the plans.
Well, I
No,
guess they had
looking at it-
to,
Go ahead, Eleanor.
I wasn't, here. This was I'm getting, because I live in the neighborhood.
Right.
The drainage was changed. And there's
Yes.
definitely an abutter whose yard fills, with water every spring.
And they already had that, yeah, and that was going
they
on
had that,
before.
yeah.
Yeah, so we ended up
And-
actually cleaning out part of the inlet pipe that brings
Yeah.
it into the next street to stop the flooding that they were
Right.
having.
But
Yeah.
actually, that was the example I wanted to bring to you, Bill, because I wasn't sure what that was. Is it a wetland?
I would have
like-
called it, we called it wetland. You folks reviewed it and it was
Okay.
wetland. So it would have been, so I would say that's an intermittent stream.
Mhm.
It was flagged as such, right? So it wouldn't have the 200 foot, and it would be classified essentially as a wetland. So then you'd have the 25 foot no touch around that. That's what you would do.
Right. Eleanor,
Uh-huh.
Bill, actually, I guess the question for you, who put that pipe there? Is that a town pipe or was that someone built that pipe to bring water from their properties into this depression area? What is it?
So we allowed them to put pipes in to kind of reconfigure and send the water as it used to go.
So it
But
goes
they-
away towards a storm drain now?
Yeah, so it essentially just broke out of the hill into like this little section, and then it became that intermittent stream.
Right, okay.
So it wasn't really, we just wanted to make, but the water, the way that everything went, they kind of built the site up a little bit. So water that used to come across now had to get kind of rerouted through the detention basin or the pond in the front, and then overflows into that location.
That little, when Jennifer. and I were
Intermittent
talking
stream,
about-
yeah, then it
You-
overflows into the intermittent stream.
Okay, yeah, there's an intermittent stream in the back. And
Mhm.
then there's the pipe, which we did not get to because the scale of the poison ivy was rather monumental, actually.
Yeah, that's a town inlet pipe, basically, is what that is,
Inlet to what?
to our street drainage.
Okay,
So
so
that comes into the street drainage and then gets sent down the roadway.
get down, goes into storm drains under the streets.
You
Okay.
got it, and then eventually discharges to a wetland,
Okay, fine.
another wetland on the other side of the road. Yeah.
All right. Now I understand how it goes.
Yeah.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, so in this scenario, you classify that as an intermittent stream, so it'd have bank protection, because
Mhm.
intermittent streams still have bank.
Right,
And then you'd have your wetland, your essentially that bank line would be your wetland flag line too.
Mhm.
And then you'd have a 25-foot protection around that as
Okay.
a no touch.
that's basically what we'd be looking for, I think.
Yeah, yeah, in that scenario, that's how this would work.
Now, you want to continue discussion here on what you presented?
Oh, sure. So the 25 applies to everything. Okay, so minor project, oh, go on.
Everything but perennial streams.
Everything. Are you confusing intermittent versus perennial streams?
Nope, perennial streams have a 200
200
foot
foot, yes.
riverfront.
Okay.
And that requires an alternatives analysis and all that other stuff, right?
Stuff, right.
And then
So
you have
we're-
your inner riparian, which is essentially the no touch, right? Unless
Right.
there's a reason that they have to do it or it's pre-existing.
So
So
we
I
don't
don't
need to
think you
touch
would,
that, yeah.
I don't think you need a 25 foot no touch on it. You already have 100 foot, right?
Yeah,
So,
okay.
The consensus of everything, so the 25 foot, wouldn't necessarily apply to land underwater, but if that land has a bank, then it applies to the bank.
you can do it off the bank. So if you wanted to add because right now the land underwater has a 100 foot buffer from it, right? So you're like Lake Q has a 100 foot buffer from it, from the edge of the bank. Ethan, you want to help me on that one?
I'm trying to, from our previous discussions, I thought we weren't gonna put a 100 foot buffer. That's, I guess, where I'm, on land underwater, but.
I thought you wanted to. And I think you have it already in the Wetland Protection Act, right?
Yeah, I mean,
You have 100 foot, so anything within the 100 feet of the bank is reviewed, right? Which is what you still want to do. And then you would have off the bank, you would have a 25 foot no touch, right? That's essentially what you're looking to do.
Jennifer, maybe you're thinking of land subject to flooding?
I think that is.
Land
the
subject to
one.
flooding is different. That's a
Yeah.
different animal. Yeah.
I don't think you need to add the restriction on the land underwater if you have it on the bank instead. I think that's what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't add it to the land underwater
Because
you have because that's a resource area as its own. So,
Mhm.
and then you'd have 25 foot no touch. So think of it like in practicality, it's going to be like ponds, right? Ponds and streams and rivers, right? So perennial streams, that would be a bank. We're not going to do it for perennial streams because you already have your riparian zone definitions. You would do it for your bank holding in like the ponds, any pond that's in town. And that includes smaller ponds.
Right, which aren't really covered under the Wetlands Protection Act. Right?
Yeah, you'd be looking to do that though, right?
Mhm.
Am I still confusing you, Jennifer?
It's helpful,
Yes.
but I think I do need some time to kind of just, process before being able to,
Yeah.
sort of wait on this, yeah.
Yeah. So the exemptions, we had emergency projects, that didn't change. We had minor project exemptions. This was following the MAC template. And we added, we realized it kind of only included utilities. So we added, maintaining existing sewer and drainage infrastructure, maintaining existing roads and sidewalks. And then I caveated, this is, subject to your feedback, but so long as modifications do not encroach closer to a resource area or direct more runoff towards a resource area. So, just if you move a little to the left, it's fine. Just don't move, closer.
Yeah. So right. And so from our perspective, I'm okay with all of that. I don't have a problem filing for stuff that we're making closer. We would do that anyway.
Right.
The question would be on the limited project status though that we have in the WPA because I don't have to meet all the standards. So that's the stuff that we need because the reason that it's set up that way is because we typically don't have the land to meet the
Okay.
resource areas, right? So that's the type of stuff that I want to make sure that we still retain. So it's consistent with the WPA. As long as that's in there, I'm good with most of this, if not all of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you would want the limited project status exemption under WPA. All right.
Yeah.
go
Mhm.
back and.
Yeah.
Ethan, do you have that handy that you could send?
Not at the moment, but when we do look at it, we can just take what's in the Wetlands Protection Act and just go from there.
Bill, how
But I
does
can
that
pull that
work?
out.
So there's two of them. So you have it for roadways, right? And it says as long as you're not increasing, you don't have to meet the performance standard for additional impervious, as long as you don't widen a road by over a lane, I think it says, or half a lane, I think it says, whatever that is. So typically, we're not going to widen a roadway without filing with you and making major changes. So we typically would only do like a sidewalk expansion. So like the example I used last time was Oak Street, right? Because we had Oak Street where, we didn't meet any performance standards for that. We used like the limited project status to do that.
So could we address that by simply adding that as projects that fit the limited project status criteria under the Wetlands Protection Act, something like that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, that it's about the performance standards and essentially having the same within your performance standards too, so that we have the same limited project status and the projects that are exempt are exempt.
Okay, so.
Yeah.
Sorry, we'll fix that. I'm gonna go back. I'll highlight that to fix. Okay, and then this exemption was for existing structures. I'm trying to think of a word that captures things simply. I don't want to list out a whole bunch of, a list of all these items, because I think people get confused and then think the Wetlands Protection Act doesn't apply, and the risk is they self-exempt.
Yeah.
So we really want to encourage people to check in with the commission. And since they're filing under the Wetlands Protection Act anyway, this would, it's not extra. So I'm trying to keep this high level. So any existing structures or use of such structure lawful at the effective date of this I need to replace this word. This chapter may continue, although such structure use does not conform to this bylaw. Any structure work previously performed within 25 feet of a resource area or 100 feet, this is supposed to be 100 feet, I should say, or within vernal pool habitat may be repaired, maintained, but in no event made larger or closer to the resource area. Any non-conforming?
Yeah, so I had language around this in the Concord one specifically. It's like that highlighted all of this and had like, because the key has to be, because you're going to run into this like a good amount. This like these examples.
Yeah.
Like not substantially enlarging not the nonconformity or something to that effect. I had language that kind of highlighted all of that. And then you could overcome it with a preponderance of evidence, whatever it may be, that there's no reasonable alternative, or you require an alternatives analysis. So somebody has a ability to at least attempt something, whether you guys agree with it or not. That is TBD, but that we handle that one, that type of stuff, I think fairly cleanly in the other one.
In the Concord bylaw? Okay.
It was in the rules and regs.
Separate from, okay.
Yeah.
Do you think we need to include that in here, or can we keep it in the rules and regs?
I would put it in the rules and regs. So I would try to just, in this document, you want to just highlight the resource areas and how you're in what they are. So you're like codifying your 25-foot no touch, adding in the vernal pool component, and then how you're delineating that, right? And then the same thing for the isolated wetland that we have to figure out. So just focus just on those three, because that's all you're really doing additional. Everything else is in the act, right? So I think that's those are the only things that are different. So rather than trying to write all of these extra stuff and trying to you're doing square peg round hole. You already have the protection. So if we already have something that you can review through the WPA, leave it, and then just add in the stuff that you want the new protections for.
And then, So we'll address this in the performance, sorry, in the regs, rules and regs.
Yep. Well, the
And
performance
then,
standards and rules and regs, it's kind of combo, but yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Then the last was language supplied by Mr. McGrail, which was existing and pending project approvals.
Yeah, that's pretty standard stuff. Yeah.
Okay, so that's fine.
Mhm.
And then, let's see.
Yeah, we might want to tweak it a little bit because I think it said like law. You want to have something where it's like lawfully completed. You don't exempt anybody just because it's there, and then they come in to
Right.
file. You know what I'm saying? It has to be something that if was either there prior to the bylaw, lawfully created, not somebody stuck a house next to a wetland without any permits and.
So that should
You know.
be in that C, existing structures or work.
I think it's just lawfully at the effective date. I should say
The-
law. Here we go.
Yeah.
Lawfully permitted. That's better.
No, I think lawful at the. That's right, right? Lawful at the any use of any.
Yeah. So I took this from the Melrose bylaw.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
You want the same approvals?
The only, this is me being cynical. Projects in the approval process. So we've received them and, the application is
Yeah,
complete.
any application submitted prior to this being effective. So
Right.
if you're still reviewing something, say there's a big giant project and it takes you a year to go through, but it's been filed. Say a project gets filed today, for example, right? And it's a
Right.
big project and it's going to take a while to get through, and you're still reviewing it when we get this passed at town meeting. It would have been filed prior to this being effective, so you would allow that to just go through the WPA.
Okay.
You have to give people some kind
Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
You need a starting spot, so that's your effective date, and then anything that's filed previously or approved previously wouldn't be like reopened with the bylaw essentially.
Right.
Yeah.
And we can address, like if there were a risk that someone would give us, a blank and a blank NOI a week before the bylaw goes into effect.
Right.
I
Well, you have
assume
to
our
have
performance standards would address whether the application was complete or not.
Yeah, you would. I would have some. You could probably massage for that scenario. You probably add
Yeah.
another little bit saying, complete application,
Yeah.
an accepted application or something like that.
Yeah.
So if like Ethan gets something that shows up to him and it's missing like all the plans and they have nothing in front of you, I mean, that's not a completed application. So
I
Right.
would suggest, Eleanor, in that second bullet,
Mhm.
projects in the approval process, any project for, leave all your other words there, but for which a complete notice of intent application has been submitted to the conservation.
and accepted.
Has been
right.
submitted to the Conservation Commission and accepted.
Yes, that's why you know it's completed. It's complete.
Do we need the and is under active or is under active review?
Yeah, I think that you can leave that in there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay.
We wouldn't be actively reviewing it if it were not a complete application.
True.
Mm,
I mean, staff doesn't bring it to us if the application is not deemed complete, right?
Yes, I hope so.
Yep.
Ethan, you buy that or you don't do that, right?
No, not yet.
Yeah.
are you saying we don't and
don't
accept
I don't think you need that last part is what we're saying,
or
because
is under
if
the
it's
active?
accepted, then yeah,
Okay.
that covers it.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. And then the commissioner,
As of the date of this bylaw, you do need that.
what's that?
You need the as of the date of.
Oh,
Effective date of the bylaw, yeah.
okay. Bylaw. And then the commission or its agent shall decide whether a project is deemed to be minor after consulting with the applicant, provided written notice has been given to the commission prior to commencement of work, and provided that the work conforms to performance standards and designs, specifications, and the regulations adopted by the commission. So hoping this gives some flexibility.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
There might be, you may want to consider like a simple application process or something too, that you do in the rules and regs, where it's like if it's something super minor and it doesn't have to come to you, it can be approved by Ethan at a certain level. That's
Right.
the way we had it in the other place. So it'd have to be, you just had to get notification that
yeah.
this was going on, so you knew it was happening.
Mhm.
We have that
And
now for certain matters, trigger rules.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, just so that everyone's not going through and hiring, everybody for something small. It's the stuff like the dead tree or the
Right.
that's going to fall in the house, like those types of things.
Okay. So I think that was it. And then the other thing, I don't know if we need this or not. The first section, I just wanted for my own benefit to sort of order the interests for the Wetlands Protection Act ones to be first, followed by our special interests or, additional interests, just to make it sort of easier to separate. So these
So the
won't
last
stay.
column is WPA.
Yeah, so
Yep.
basically anything that's not starred is WPA. And these would be the additional ones, which are often common,
Mhm.
those are frequently added. And then
Yeah.
just some statements sort of extending the purpose of the bylaw.
Yep. That's important.
So again, this is to Mull. This one came from Linfield. And then I added this, but I realized I think we have this statement like at the very end of the bylaw, but basically maybe putting it up front, like where we're silent, the presumption is the Wetlands Protection Act applies. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Yeah, it's kind of tough to go through these like without
Yeah.
like if I had it in front of me and I've reviewed it a little bit, I could
Yeah.
probably give you real guidance. Otherwise, I'm kind of flying
Yeah.
blind on this one. So,
So I'd love to comment. Yeah.
what about for next steps, what if we were to take everything you have here,
Mhm.
right? And then make any tweaks that we think are necessary with track changes so we can follow it, right?
Yeah.
And then if we're going to try to change the outline of how we're explaining it, give a draft outline, not like rewrite the whole bylaw, because I don't want to do that, so that
Yeah.
all the work that you've done doesn't get lost.
Yeah.
And then say, does this make sense to structure it this way? And then we can start filling in the parts, peeling out stuff from this draft. Does that seem like a good way to move forward?
Sure.
So
But Bill,
yeah, so I'm
I
sorry,
don't know
go
what
ahead.
Jennifer thinks. We did structure this like Concord. Was there like a different town you wanted to use?
So I was thinking, if you define it a little bit cleaner, because there was a couple of things with the Concord bylaw, like I was saying in the last meeting, where as we administered it, we ran into clunky stuff around the vernal pool was a clunky.
Okay.
So we didn't love it. And we
Okay.
probably would, if I stayed, I probably would have made some tweaks.
Okay.
So it came up in a couple of items. It doesn't come up all the time. So it's like once you get through it a couple of times and you run into one weird case, then you're like, well, that doesn't make sense the way I wrote it. So
Right.
we were saying if we kind of look at each individual resource area, identify, generally you're talking about the purpose of it, right? And then
Mhm.
you're talking about each area and why you're including it, right?
Right. Right.
Then you have your how you're delineating it,
Right.
and have those for each of them. And then you can have most of these other things. So your jurisdiction is going to be 3 subparts. So like A would be vernal pools, B would be, the no touch, if you want to do it that way. And then C would be the isolated land or
Okay.
isolated wetland.
So then this, like, isolated wetlands should really probably come out and be its own bullet because it would have its own.
Yeah, so I would make that B, for example, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Something like naturally. And then this is the other part is, do we want to just, I guess my focus was on protecting naturally occurring isolated wetlands, like
Yes.
trying
Well,
to
so there
leave
are
that. Yeah.
there are parts already in the Wetland Protection Act that exempt drainage structures. So that's already in there.
Okay.
So again, with the definition stuff we were talking about, as long as we're not defining it and we're saying everything falls within the WPA definitions, right?
Okay.
As long as you're not adding a definition that changes it. So I would be defining, I'd be defining like those three things, basically.
Mhm.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And then everything else is already in the WPA and you can still use that in your deliberations and in your discussions.
And then Jennifer, did we decide today, like isolated wetlands, do we want jurisdiction over 100 feet and 25? Like, what are we thinking about that? Or do we just want,
I think to me, it in part makes a difference whether you're talking about an isolated vegetated wetland or if you're talking about like an isolated land subject to flooding.
Mhm.
I think I would think about those two things differently. And I'm also just thinking about how this, kind of identifying these specific resource areas. And I understand this maps onto how the WPA does it, but it does seem at odds with how we have the jurisdiction written, which basically says any freshwater wetland is going to be, a resource area. Which means anyone that's not already a BVW is going to be an isolated wetland. At least that's how it seems to me.
Yeah, that seems accurate.
Seems like that's where we're going, yes.
Mhm.
so would you just call it isolated wetland?
Well, isolated, not insulated.
Oh, did I say insulated? Could be worse. Spell check.
There you go.
Right.
What we may need to do, Eleanor, is in the prior bullet,
Mhm. Say any bordering.
we need to modify freshwater wetland.
Mhm.
Maybe
Maybe that needs to be any bordering wetland, or like this marsh, wet meadow, swamp, lake, pond of any size, that could be down under isolated wetland too, right?
I think you put that at the top and say that it's part of your purpose of what you're trying to protect, like all of these types of things, right? Because it's nothing in there is new, right? So the bylaws for new things that you're getting jurisdiction over, right? So you're gonna look for your 25-foot no touch. You're gonna look for your isolated wetland if that's what you're gonna do, and or isolated land subject to flood, however you work that stuff out, and then the vernal pool. Those are the only things that are new, right? So focus on the stuff that's new so that you don't have all this cross talking between the WPA and this. You're basically going to say any resource areas, like you're going to say anything that's a bank, you have 25-foot no touch from. Anything that's a bordering subject, bordering vegetated wetland, you have a 25-foot no touch from.
Okay, but our
And so you,
jurisdiction. Go.
so you
Well,
keep
our
it clear.
jurisdiction extends to anything under the WPA already.
You can say that.
And we may want to be clear that that's the case, that jurisdiction includes anything under the WPA, and additionally,
These are the definitions. Yeah,
these are
exactly.
the items that we are specifically taking jurisdiction over that are not in addition to the WPA.
You got it. You got it. That's the cleanest way to do it.
Yeah.
Because this way you don't have to, because what you're trying to do is avoid all the definitions. Because that's where we ran into problems with the definitions.
You don't want to try to restate all the WPA definitions because you'll
absolutely not.
Someone.
Yeah.
So I gotta, yeah, how do we want to word this again to begin, and we can work it in, but,
Well,
Um,
why don't we do this, right? Rather than trying to change a
Yeah.
bullet, if we're gonna tweak the layout a little bit, why don't we, maybe Ethan and I take a stab at it with this stuff. We'll just go through this and make sure the language all makes sense. Anything that's a little wonky, we'll either edit as a track changes so you can accept it or not accept it. And
mhm,
then we'll give like maybe a layout of what I was thinking. And if you
okay,
folks like that, we'll roll with that and start filling it in with the language from here. Or we can, if you don't like it, we'll just scrub it and keep working on this. But at least we've all gone, at least I've had an opportunity to go through it. Cause I've only read whatever we've talked about while we've been talking on this call. So that's all I've actually read of this. And I don't know how it relays with the rest of the stuff in it. So, if we're making changes to this section, I don't know if I would even
I'm
agree
just
with making
leaving
it.
notes, I'm just leaving notes here to
Yeah.
follow up, okay.
Oh, okay. All right.
And
Something
I
like,
think even if we do that, I would like to get a copy of this with the updates, even if we do end up sort of doing that, you and, Bill and Ethan
Without a
work on it
doubt.
some more.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
also
Agree.
suggest that, Eleanor, you recirculate this both with the markup here and
yeah,
a clean version. So
there's,
then ultimately, the next step is going to be marking up the clean version.
Mhm.
I
And,
don't, go on.
and that's, I mean, whether it's Ethan and Bill meeting to do that, or the larger group of us going through it. But either way, I think it's difficult to black line a black line.
Correct. I don't think this is really at a great spot for like a clean version, because there's sort of open items to address.
I suggest
But you can
the
use the
two
track change, yeah. Yeah,
I mean,
You know.
one question that I had just from the conversation just like 1 minute ago was if we don't explicitly make the bordering vegetated wetlands, jurisdictional, how can we put a 25-foot no disturb around it?
If we don't make them jurisdictional, how can you? No, because you would just say that all of the resource areas within the Wetland Protection Act are incorporated into the bylaw. And then you define where you want your 25-foot no touch. Because it's really only going to be on 2 resource areas, I think, unless you change your mind on that. But
Right, I thought do we not agree we want to do 100-foot protection for
oh yeah, no, I meant
the
for the
vernal
no
pool?
touch.
Okay.
I just
okay.
meant for the no touch, like, because you have to define what's going to be a no touch. The 100-foot's the same, right? In everything else, you already have. That's what has to come to you, right?
Ideally, the 100-foot is a no touch,
No,
unless
that's not what
for
we're
the
saying.
vernal pool. For the vernal pool, yeah.
You're
I think you guys have to decide on that one.
Yeah,
So once you
that's where I'm
decide on what
trying.
you
I'm
want to
like,
do,
I'm not. I don't think we're on the
Not
same
a point.
page, because you have no protection. I mean, you might as well not protect vernal pools if you don't protect their upland habitat, because they spend the summer, up in the woods, and then come back down, it's springtime.
So in practice, what I've done in the past and what I've had to
Mhm.
do is and I mentioned this as a joke last time, but track where they go and provide an ability for them to get to other locations.
Right.
And you prove that it happened. You put in sand at the bottom so you can see that the feet that they're using them. That's what you do.
Uh-huh.
So, so you don't necessarily have to protect the whole thing as a no touch. You just have to allow the movement and make sure that they can still use their stuff. That's what's happened as like performance standard stuff that I've had to do in the past.
hmm
And I've done it for probably back in my design days, probably 4 projects like that.
So rather than the 100-foot no touch around the vernal pool, the bylaws would require what, Bill? That you demonstrate?
Yeah, you demonstrate the need for it or what has to be protected. There's a couple of ways you could do it, but I wouldn't do a 100-foot no touch just as just as a hard no. I mean, that I think 25-foot no touch, I think makes sense. And then within the 100 foot, this is where you come up with the performance standards for each of your resource areas, right? And so you define in your performance standards what you would want folks to do.
Well,
So that may be track where they go to see if you can
Right.
use any sections of the 100 foot buffer, like that type of stuff.
well, I think for example, Paul, if you went and visited the vernal pool for the Vogue project, I think they technically complied with the Wetlands Protection Act, and I think they left 25 feet. But the vernal pool, like, it's gone today. Like, there's no creatures in it, right? There's no breeding. It dried up. Like, having that 25 foot didn't do anything because of all the other activity that was going on near that vernal pool. So that's why it is important to look at the vernal pool habitat.
Mhm.
And
Okay.
then, once that road goes in, you take the trees out next to a wetland, it changes the characteristics. It may not, the water may evaporate, the vegetation may change. So I don't know. I just want to think about these more. I think
Yeah, I'm in agreement. Yeah.
the already developed areas have that exemption opportunity because they're already there. But
To your point though, Eleanor, if you don't protect out to, the reasonable level of habitat usage or habitat value for the vernal pool, I can see that you would essentially deprive it of inflow as well as of the upland habitat that's used by the
right.
vernal species.
And the cooling, all those trees,
Right.
that keep it cool and the temperature low.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, I'm in agreement on all that. I think I talked about it before. So there's
Yeah.
ways to look at all of these things,
yeah.
but you want to you got to give folks an opportunity to do something.
Right. A little wiggle room.
You got to give them wiggle room and some ability to be, you can't just say, okay, there's a vernal pool on this site, so now you can't touch anything here at all. I mean, I don't know if that's going to pass muster at the state level for an appeal. Even if you write it in as I mean, it has to be reasonable regulation, right?
Right.
So you got to look at your reasonableness test too. And typically the way it's been done is, okay, well, where are they going?
Right.
So if this is where they go, then set it up for where they go and protect that section.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so we can look at what you done in Concord if that helps.
Yeah, I don't think it was super tight. That's the stuff that was
Okay.
the problem. So I think I want to put some thought into it
Okay.
with you
Do you have
all.
another example?
Trying to think. I'd have to look at some of the jobs the towns that I did the jobs in. So I did one in Bolton. I did one in Bellingham that had to have these like little turtle highway things. Concord had one done for Mass DOT for a wildlife corridor that was created, but that wasn't specifically for vernal pools per se.
But you'd want like a little crossing or something if you're doing a
Yeah, you essentially make like a bridge for them. That's what you do, but it
Yeah.
has to have a certain, like the openness ratio stuff comes in, like all those different types of things come in to
Mhm.
play.
Okay.
But
So-
I think that might end up being phase 2, right? So maybe we get going through what we have here because we have a good chunk of stuff. We've been at it for a while.
Yeah.
You
We
know,
actually- Go on.
I'm sorry, go ahead. You go ahead.
We have a hard stop at 9, so
Okay.
I think we're hoping to actually figure out what our next steps are, put a time, so that when we come back to the next meeting,
Mhm.
we've looked at something or thought about it, and then sort of assign follow-ups
Yeah,
among
I dig
this
it.
group. And then
So-
yeah, go on.
So I think we suggested, or I suggested earlier, to go and do, get us this draft so we can read through.
Mhm,
Ethan and I can make changes and tweaks to it that we suggest, right?
mhm.
To the language that's in here. And then we can develop kind of like an outline of what we would say, maybe to try to do this as the bylaw outline with these sections added in. And then that would be the first step. Figure out if everyone's in agreement on that approach.
Mhm.
And we can have that probably done in the next, say a week and a half, 2 weeks, probably. Does that sound reasonable, Ethan?
Yeah, sounds good.
So it would be by our second meeting in October.
Yeah, that should be reasonable to get to. Yeah. So then we can hopefully have, kind of a general idea of what we're adding in. And if there's changes, I mean, we could send this around and then just have folks mark up bullets and stuff and send back as track changes too. We just got to figure out what we want to do as the process.
Yeah.
So that everyone's comments are coming in and we can make sure we're incorporating everybody's comments, right?
I think it's helpful to come together and talk through it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's, were we gonna do a Friday meeting? I don't
Yeah, I'm
know.
happy to do that. I prefer, just like I said, not to do the fours because we do get out at 12:30 and I do
Yeah.
like my family sometimes. So I do like to see
Yes.
them every so often.
Paul, Jennifer, were you able to make like a 12 on Fridays?
Yeah,
We're talking about a 1 hour meeting at 12 on Fridays.
Yeah.
Um, let me check. Is it a particular Friday?
Looking at my personal schedule. Pretty sure that.
We could do
Maybe
next
I was thinking the
Friday.
10th. Yeah, the 10th. You want to do the 10th?
Yeah, if that's the next Friday. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
would be good. And then by then you maybe have a format you can take us through.
Yeah, that sounds good. So what we'll do is we'll try to get that done over the next, try to get something out a couple of days before it so you can at least see where we're at.
Yeah.
If any quick thoughts you have, send them so that we can be prepared to talk to them. So just so that we're all on the same page and it's moving.
Right.
That's why I want to try to get drafts out and comments back to some degree. I figure we'll still walk through them all. But if we can gather comments, we can actually be at least prepared to talk through them or do the research that we have to do so that we're addressing everybody's stuff and it's moving in a timely manner. I think if we're just drafting stuff and then we all go talk about it, we're going to lose
Yeah.
time.
I agree,
You don't
getting
want
the
to.
comments before and then coming back together.
Yeah. So I mean, I think we can try to commit to, today's Tuesday, maybe about a week to go through what you have, any suggested language tweaks or stuff to highlight as concerns, and then a draft outline of what we think it should look like
Mhm.
and get that out. I mean, Ethan, do you think maybe we could do that by, like, if we give them a week, if we got that done by the 7th or 8th?
Mhm.
So it's out to them so they can comment and look at it at least?
Yeah, we could do that.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
And he'll be the point of contact on all of this. I'll just be obviously on the meetings and helping out with everything, but he'll be the one sending out all the stuff and all that other
Okay.
happy stuff.
so we'd have a public meeting on the 10th. October 10 at noon.
Yep. And we'll schedule that. Yeah. So you'll have a draft of it. So you'll have a draft from us on hopefully the Tuesday. And then agenda has to go out on the Tuesday, right? So
Okay, that works.
yeah, so we can just have that as the agenda to start. And I'm thinking this, because, we'll talk about outline and we'll talk about, language revisions maybe as our two topics. And then going forward, as we have those meetings, we'll hopefully narrow in on like like one item. So it'd be
Yeah.
like, okay, we're gonna just do vernal pools today and blast all that stuff out with
Mhm.
performance standards and get everybody done. That would be ideal.
Okay. Well, it seems
right.
like, yeah, exemptions and then vernal pools are the two items that we could probably close down the fastest.
Yep.
And then isolated wetlands, I think we need a little more time to just think about
Yep.
that.
Okay.
Um,
All right. So if we're doing for the for that Friday meeting, we'll cover outline changes in this and then maybe exemptions
yeah, I
/
mean,
limited projects. Yeah.
aren't we pretty much done with that? Or in a good place? I think we could look at,
We're okay. We're okay. I want to just double check it with the limited project stuff. I think we're just going to
Okay.
reference sections in the WPA is what I was assuming we're
Okay.
gonna do. And just say we want the same protections here, if you guys are on board with it.
okay, we just
Yeah, I
need to
think
make
it would
sure.
be helpful to go through that sort of again after we've had time to look at, you know, the
Mhm.
language.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then in terms of looking at different options for isolated wetlands or vegetated wetlands, Jennifer, is that something you had an interest in looking at, or?
Yeah, I can do that in terms of more research into that, distinguishing IVW versus isolated land subject to flooding. That
Yeah,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
because I think that, yeah, that was sort of the question I got back was, are you sure you just want to do IVWs or do you want to also do isolated land subject to flooding?
Yeah.
Okay. And then I think as we get that, we can kind of work on FAQs that have come up. And so I'm happy to sort of take that high level to at least start drafting that if anybody,
Mhm.
if that's helpful.
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, you're going to want to roll this all out. The FAQs, I would assume you're rolling everything out with your like our final draft. That's when like you'll basically think of it like you're sending everything out to everybody. That's where you would probably have your FAQs, you'd have any updated PowerPoint, you'd have all that stuff. So you're looking at that a little bit down the road. I think that's sort of how you want to do it. Just in my experience in writing bylaws, like, you know, we can't keep everybody up to date on everything all the time. If they want to watch these meetings, they can.
Mhm.
But
Okay.
I mean, you know, you're not going to answer everyone's question. That's, you know what I mean? And we have to be able to advance this to a point that we like it. That's when we can start
Yeah.
answering questions because we're like, okay, well, we've thought all this stuff through now. So we have an answer for you. You come up with an idea or something we have to change. Well, that now is productive, you know?
Right. No, I
Like
think
right
there's some
now, no,
general
go ahead.
highlight level questions that we're getting that
Okay.
recurring,
Wanna
like
track
how they
those,
interact. What? Yeah, I'm
Well,
trying to track
track
those and
them, I would
draft.
say
Yeah.
track them, but I'm not sure we want to start structuring
Yeah.
normal kinds of responses at this point. I would hold that until we get further
Oh,
down.
of course. Of
I agree
course.
with Bill that let's get a document we like and then deal with the question, the need for FAQs around what we actually end up with rather than where we might be going.
I don't think the FAQs were for the like bylaw technical stuff, more the high level questions we keep getting. You know, how much more will this cost me? You know, that type of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of tough because you can't answer anything. You know what I mean? Until you figure out what it's gonna be, right?
Yeah, I mean, we.
You might have another filing that you
Mhm.
didn't have, or you don't even know yet, right? The only thing, let's say, like your answer might be for that, right? Well, you know, we're adding in this new resource area, so if you have this, you wouldn't have had to file before, but now you do. That's your answer. But everything else is the same process, right?
Mhm.
Mhm. Okay.
And Bill, in the previous meeting, you had suggested that I think that the commission, right, to just write an update to town council. That's something I don't think we assigned last time.
It could be a draft, even if you can have Ethan even draft a quick one just to say, here's where we are. We're looking to do this in the spring. We're planning to be in front of you in by beginning of next year, end of this year, to review kind of where we are and start formally the, you know, the bylaw. I don't know what you want to call it. Maybe like I don't want to say dog and pony show because that's probably not what you want to put in the letter, but what you're gonna have to do. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, just to give them an update so they're generally aware of what's going on.
Yeah, I think
You
that
know,
makes sense to have Ethan write it because then we don't have to worry about communicating, you know, outside the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a draft letter with, you know, we can have that maybe Ethan for, you know, the day of the meeting if need be. I mean, it's going to be a page, so that wouldn't be
you
a
know,
biggie.
that we review. Yeah.
Yeah, just review it before we send it.
Right. The The only other last thing I wanted to add, and it came up in our the town day, was, you know, fines that we're having issue, you know, so just thinking that in a way, we didn't put them in our bylaw. I wanted to just look at what other towns were doing, because we do have scofflaws who the commission has historically maybe had some trouble doing enforcement orders. At least this is a resident that shared with me who has been, you know, trying to work for years to get an abutter to not, you know, throw
Grass
trash.
into the thing. Yeah.
Well, more than like construction debris, that type of thing. And so, you know, having something has a little bit of teeth.
Yeah, let me take why don't we take
yeah.
a look at that? I mean, that's something we can probably get to. I mean, it's going to be in
Yes,
it.
later,
But yeah, but I mean, we have like enforcement and other bylaws. I know I have something in the stormwater bylaw. I don't know off the top of my head what it says. And I
Okay.
definitely had it in the old place. We had, you know, a whole process where, you know, there's like one law in town that has like all of the different, essentially like tickets you can write. Typically what it is it has to be under a certain threshold for it to be, for not to elevate to some other type of law that the town has to pass. And then you just make it so it's a daily fine. So if you don't fix it,
Right.
you know, 10 days, you're, you know, say it's $250. It's, well, now 10 days you didn't do anything. Now you're at $2,500.
Right.
A
More
month,
like,
now you're at, yeah, right.
Like an ultimatum address, appear before us or whatever,
Yep, exactly.
or else.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or
that's
else you're going to be out of some dough.
That's it. Thank you so
But yeah,
much.
yeah, no problem. All right. All right, folks. Go Red
Thank
Sox.
you.
All right.
Paul, Jennifer,
Talk to you.
anything else?
I don't have anything more right now. So our next meeting is Tuesday. We have a very long agenda.
We need to
I think
talk.
question, what? Go ahead.
There's way too much on it. And we need to be more realistic about what we can get through in an evening, like having 4-hour meetings or 3-hour, like as close to 2 hours as we can keep them, maybe 2.5, but they're kind of excessive.
There was an extra week this month, so that throws off the filing deadlines as well.
Yeah, so I think like we have to prioritize the filing permits, and then there's limited opportunity to get to extra stuff. So with the filing permits, just making sure we have everything we need. Bill, you don't have to stay on for this if you don't want. You're welcome to drop off. But
okay.
You know, making sure we have plans that show the wetland or whatever. So we're not, you know, that we've identified what were the new items that were open before that need to come back to us, or what's changing, so that we're in the position to make a quick decision because we have all the information we need.
Sure, I'll make sure all these items have all the materials that we need for them.
Okay, I still think that the L&L development 13-unit project is going to take time, and package storage is going to take time. There's no question about that for those two.
I guess when you say that, why? So the open item for packed storage was getting somebody to delineate the wetlands, right? Has that happened yet?
I think they're doing that at the moment. I think they'll have that done by the next meeting. Yeah.
So they'll have that done by this Tuesday?
Yep.
And they'll have new plans?
I'm not sure about that part.
I mean, if they don't have new plans based on a new delineation, it's not worth us taking it up.
Yeah, that's.
But it's up to the applicant.
The applicant. Okay.
That's the problem.
Yeah. We cannot continue these projects if they don't consent.
Right.
We have to deny them.
So what would be helpful, Ethan, is like on these, well, one for me, getting the information sooner. I know it may not be possible with these projects, but it's something we need to talk about because, getting so much information and just having a weekend to go through it is.
But that's the commission, that's the deadline that's set by the commission. That's your policy.
Okay, but we can change that policy
Right.
in the
But
near
right now it's
future.
the Tuesday before.
Right. Okay, so we should talk about when we want to change that policy and make something new in effect. In the meantime, Ethan, it's helpful if you can, when you send us the stuff, maybe just a one pager of what's changed. Okay, now there's a new stormwater report. They've changed the thing, they've incorporated some comments from ZBA. I don't know what it is, but having some sort of background on why they're coming back to us would be helpful.
Sure. Yeah.
And what we should be like focusing in on.
Mhm.
I can't, and I don't know if it would also be helpful if we had any open items from before, if you feel like you have a sufficient understanding of what our concerns were, or if we have to email those to you so that you take those back to the applicant so they're ready to address them when they're at the next hearing. Does that make sense? I'm just talking about a general kind of, how can we make things more efficient for everybody?
Mhm. Did you think the page I wrote up last meeting was helpful? Like something like that again would be good.
I never received it. I wrote back to you and I said I couldn't see the page.
Yeah.
But if you send it to me now, I can take a look and see if that met it.
Sure. I'll send that to you. It kind of was the same as what you just described, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I was looking for that and I didn't see that last time. Did you see that, Paul?
Yes, I did.
Oh, why did I miss it? Huh. Was it embedded in something else?
I think it was just a Word document attached on the email,
Yeah.
like additional info or something like that.
With the meeting materials, yeah.
Sorry, what did you say, Jennifer?
Yeah, I think it was sent with the meeting materials, but yeah, it was a separate Word document.
Oh, I was looking for that. Okay.
It was a Word attachment to the email that Ethan sent.
Okay. I'm going to go back and look. I am probably crazy. That's fine.
Yeah, I started writing that up for this upcoming meeting, but
No,
I'll
that's
definitely
perfect.
do
That's a huge
focus more
help.
on the changes. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's helpful. I don't think I had any huge concerns about those two projects.
Okay.
Anyway.
Ethan, the other thing I noticed in this agenda is there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 601 Edgewater Court or Edgewater Drive and 101 Edgewater Drive. Is that correct or is that a typo?
I think that's correct. But those are a bit simpler. I'll write those up a bit more, but those can kind of get grouped together.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. So I guess we can send you comments if we're missing something else, but like for something like the salt storage, it's helpful to see like if they're changing the location, how far is it from the wetland? Is it, what's kind of the runoff like direction, or is there a storm drain right next to it where it's going to run off, that type of thing?
Sure. Yep.
I guess the other one, I would suggest we take the proposed wetland bylaw off the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not going to be getting to it until the second meeting in the month and we're not going to be meeting on it until the 10th, let's pull it from the agenda now.
Okay.
And then the saltwater storage location for Edgewater Park. Are we taking an action on that? Or are we just simply, is this an FYI?
Just letting them know that you're okay with the location of it.
Then I guess we better deal with that one sooner rather than later. We are getting.
Yeah.
And the other one we need to deal with though too is Clyde Court.
Mm-hmm. I have to go back and look at what we had, but something that just showed, where that house and fence was in relation to the property line.
Did you walk it or not?
No, I was only able to see it from an abutters.
Okay, because Jennifer and I actually went there and, went into the wetland behind and I would guess we were on the abutters property. That discussion we had with Bill
Yeah.
wasn't what we saw that day.
Yeah, I think most of that property goes right up very close to the home, but we should probably table the discussion till the next meeting. But I think, in the interest of being a little more precise, Ethan, if I'll send you a note, but if you have something that just sort of shows that, where the house is in proximity to the property line and the fence that was put up.
Yep.
Okay. I think that's it. Sorry, I can't pull up that.
Anything additional?
I think Jennifer needs to go, and
Yeah, you've got it. You need to
she
get
had a
out.
hard time. Yeah.
All right. I apologize for keeping us this long.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks,
Like-
Ethan. Thanks.
Adjourned?
Yep. Second,
All in favor?
Eleanor. Yes.
Jennifer? And I'm in favor. So we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Well, see you Tuesday. Good night.
All right.